season, time to get some guys back, but you really just don't want to start the first podcast of the regular season having to talk about injuries.
And no, but unfortunately we do. Because the Orioles suffered a major, major loss the other day, very early in the season, and that was outfielder Colton Cowser with a left thumb fracture. Brandon Hyde said that injury is a minimum 6 to 8 weeks recovery. Hopefully it is closer to the 6-week side than the 8-week side. But Colton Cowser gets hurt sliding into first base. It's worked for him before. We saw it in Houston last year. It's not something that you really coach, but you understand the instincts there of Colton Cowser just trying to make a play and trying to get into first base safely. Before we get into what this means for the Orioles and how they will adjust, obviously the first reaction is just that this is a huge loss. Colton Cowser is an everyday player. He is an elite defender in a corner outfield. He is a good defender in center field. Good at the plate. He was going to be in the lineup against left-handers and against right-handers. He is one of the few guys in this Orioles lineup that you can really say that about as a true everyday player, regardless of who is on the mound that day. He had an outstanding spring training at the plate. Everything was trending up. He was my pick this year for a breakout star and an all-star. I believe you picked him in our season predictions as an all-star as well. So this is just a brutal loss. I mean, he was your leadoff hitter while Gunnar Henderson was out. It's a very, very important part of the team that you will now be without for a few months.
Right. I mean, you said it. Brandon Hyde said it. It is just a big blow to this lineup, both offensively and defensively. Last season, 96th percentile and outs above average, 768 OPS to end the season as well. It's just really unfortunate when you look in retrospect, 2 fractured hand injuries or hand injuries in total. Last year in the playoffs, fracturing his left hand after being hit by a pitch. This year now to start off the season. Arguably 2 very difficult times to go on the injured list.
Yeah.
And it's just really unfortunate. But like you mentioned, it is a big blow to the lineup. We even saw on Monday, yes, the lineup did very well, scoring 8 runs. None of them were home runs. You like to see that, especially when last season the offense had some struggles scoring without it being home run or just a home run heavy team. So they did very well in that sense. But you did notice a drastic shift or drastic change from the top of the lineup to the middle of the lineup and then to the end of the lineup, because that was very, very reliant on the front end of the lineup. I mean, the last 2 guys in the lineup did very well as well with Ramon Arias, Jackson Holliday. But if you have Gunnar Henderson and Colton Cowser in that lineup from the very beginning of the season and moving forward, that is a really, really solid lineup from top to bottom. And losing Cowser and not having Gunnar Henderson in this home opener was definitely a big blow to it. And luckily, like you mentioned, we are going to see Gunnar Henderson come back soon, but with both of them in it, it just is a whole different lineup.
Yeah, it's look, Cowser was one of the most important pieces of this lineup. 24 home runs last year, 24 doubles, a 768 OPS. He was a very, very crucial part. And I think once Gunnar Henderson came back, you were probably looking at Cowser being your cleanup hitter. I think he's in that conversation with Ryan O'Hearn, with Ryan Mountcastle. And he is a true 5-tool player. When Brandon Hyde talks about the strengths of this 2025 Orioles team, it is in the fact that they are built with really, really good athletes. And Colton Cowser was a guy who had the potential to hit 20-plus home runs, to steal 20-plus bases, to play elite defense in the outfield. He was exactly the mold of what this Orioles team is and can be in 2025. And luckily, it's not an injury more major than 6 to 8 weeks, but 6 to 8 weeks is still a really, really long time. And after that, Colton Cowser is still going to need to find that beginning of season rhythm a little bit. It takes a little while to get into the swing of a season, and Cowser didn't have enough games to begin the year to really get into that flow. He was one of the few guys in this lineup that didn't set the world on fire to begin the year, did have a home run early on, but it's just, it's a really tough loss. There's really no other way to put it outside of the fact that Colton Cowser is a good player and the Orioles are now out a good player for a long time.
Yeah, he was just the perfect mold and identity for this clubhouse. I mean, you look at Adley and Gunnar and Jackson Holliday and Colton Cowser. Like you mentioned, they are all incredibly strong athletes, and Colton is one of those guys that you fully rely on, whether it's on the offensive side of things or on the defensive side of things, and someone that you really, really wanted to have as an everyday player going to 2025. And like you said very early on, he could have been on pace to be an all-star as well. It just is really unfortunate both for the team and for him. I'm very upset for him as well because it is kind of freak accident. Brandon Hyde said that it was just very much of a baseball player's instinct to slide into first, and it's just so unfortunate for all parties involved.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think a lot of folks have thrown around that he could have been an all-star this year. It just felt like a natural year two progression for Colton Cowser. He was runner-up in Rookie of the Year voting a season ago, and he just felt to be on that trajectory. The spring was outstanding. The defense is already incredible. So it felt like everything was trending in the right direction and everything was looking up for Colton Cowser. So unfortunately, he is now sidelined for a while. This isn't to say that he isn't going to be a great player once he returns.
Right.
He absolutely is. But it's just unfortunate that everything seemed to be trending in the right direction for this guy, and now that progress is halted for a while here. But, of course, there are implications here for what this means for the Orioles. I think the most obvious scenario here is that we see some more playing time for Heston Kjerstad, who was your de facto with Ramon Laureano. However, I don't think Kjerstad comes in and immediately fills the role of an everyday player.
Right.
Like, Heston, he doesn't have the same skill set. I don't think he has, at the plate, earned that yet. Colton Cowser didn't earn it last year as soon as Austin Hayes went down, right? It was a month of Colton Cowser being one of the best hitters in baseball, and then he started to get the everyday at-bats. So we still need to see that progression from Heston Kjerstad a little bit. I think he absolutely gets increased opportunities. I just don't think it's a one-for-one, okay, Colton Cowser's out, Heston Kjerstad fills that role immediately.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. It's kind of similar to last season, too, when you have Jordan Westburg go down, Ryan Mountcastle go down, Ramon Arias. You had Emmanuel Rivera and Livan Soto be there, but they weren't going to be the types of guys that filled the shoes to the correct caliber of what the O's were losing to that lineup, because you have Colton Cowser, and he's going to be 100% your everyday player. Like you mentioned, Heston Kjerstad still needs to prove that and still needs to be the guy that can show he can take left-on-left opportunities and he can get on base and he can slug every single day, because the power is there and the opportunity wasn't beforehand. But now we've even talked about leading into this season that Heston Kjerstad fully deserves the opportunity and the correct amount of at-bats to get there to prove himself. But of course, there was a logjam in the outfield, and there was a lot of depth and talent at the big league level already. Heston Kjerstad was going to be that fourth or fifth spot anyways. He wasn't really going to slot into that every day. But this grants him the opportunity to prove that a little bit more so than before, which is really necessary for him. And I think that so far he is going to make that trajectory as well. We saw him get his first hit of the season the other day on Monday. So it was definitely good to see him get on base and make some offensive production, even though it took a little bit of time into the game.
Yeah, it was a really nice hit the other way. I think it was 97 off the bat going the other direction, but I think that's a great way of putting it. He now has the opportunity to earn more playing time. The playing time was always going to come. I know there were some frustrations early on with Heston Kjerstad not getting as many starts as people wanted him to. Ryan O'Hearn is lighting the world on fire right now. Tyler O'Neill doing the same thing in the outfield. Cedric Mullins doing the same thing. And Colton Cowser was an everyday player. So there wasn't a lot of room for Heston Kjerstad to get worked in. And you saw immediately as Colton Cowser was unavailable, Heston Kjerstad got a start against a left-handed starting pitcher, which we have not seen him get throughout his big league career to this point. So that was a pretty clear indication that he is going to get the chance to earn more playing time, but it's just that. He's got to earn it. He's got to take advantage of the opportunity now. It's an unfortunate scenario that the opportunity comes with the fact that Colton Cowser goes down with injury, but this is now a chance for Kjerstad to prove himself a little bit more. I do think also what we're going to see is probably a lot more Ryan O'Hearn in the corner outfield. Rather than just as a designated hitter first base option.
Totally
I know
agree.
O'Hearn worked a lot on his first base defense in the offseason because his defense at first base wasn't outstanding last year. O'Hearn's not going to be an incredible defender in the corner outfield, but if he keeps hitting the way that he's hitting,
right,
you don't really care. You're just trying to get him in the lineup as much as possible. But I think between the two, Kjerstad is probably your preferred corner outfield defender between him and Ryan O'Hearn, but I think both of those guys can find ways to be in the lineup together, which was something that was a little bit more difficult with a healthy Colton Cowser. I also don't think the replacement is as simple as, a lefty goes down. How about Dylan Carlson? He's a switch hitting outfielder. I don't know if Dylan Carlson survives Gunnar Henderson coming back this week because there are a lot of infielders at this point, and I don't think there is a infielder naturally that it makes sense to send down in this Gunnar Henderson promotion, which he looks very healthy in AAA Norfolk. He has matched a couple of home runs. He is going to come back later this week. Hopefully, the hope is tomorrow. That's the earliest that Colton Cowser can come back, as we are live here at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. Gunnar Henderson could be back on Thursday. I think Dylan Carlson is probably the most logical one to go back down to AAA Norfolk. Jorge Mateo does not have any minor league options, so you can't just send him down.
Right.
You're not going to send down somebody like Ramon Arias, who has been off to a really nice start to the season. There's not an infielder that makes sense. And so it's ironic. We had so much conversation about, okay, once Mateo and Gunnar are back, what happens to the position player battle here? Is it Heston Kjerstad that goes back down? Is it a Ramon Laureano move? What is the corresponding move? And, of course, that conversation unfortunately works itself out with Colton Cowser goes down with injury, and now you're left with somebody like Dylan Carlson, who it seemed like the plan early on was to be able to bounce back and forth. So I don't think Carlson, even though he is a switch hitter and can be a left-handed outfield option, is the guy that's going to stick around and take some of those at-bats from Colton Cowser. I think it's more likely Kjerstad and Ryan O'Hearn.
Right, and as you mentioned with O'Hearn, too, with kind of that infield-outfield flexibility, Jorge Mateo is the same way as well. So when you look at the amount of numbers you have in the infield as opposed to the outfield, it makes sense to keep those guys on that have proved themselves more, like O'Hearn, Mateo, and Mateo especially coming back from injury, as opposed to keeping Dylan Carlson on the roster or in the big league roster. So, but it was also really good to see on Monday that Cedric Mullins stayed in the lineup with a left-on-left situation, especially because he performed really, really well. He went 2 for 4 and 4 RBIs on the day. So Cedric Mullins certainly proved himself as well for that left-on-left situation. I know that if you had Colton Cowser healthy and that whole outfield, all of the options, then Cedric Mullins most likely wouldn't have started in a left-on-left situation.
Right.
But it was really good to see him go out there in center field, especially on home opening day, and perform the way that he did.
Yeah, and we'll talk probably later in this podcast about some of the good stuff and how well guys have been doing. But I think that's a good thing to see in general with Mullins getting the start against a left-handed starting pitcher at home for opening day, because there's a lot of conversation about how the Orioles use platoons. They are pretty platoon heavy. They look at the numbers, they look at the splits, and they say, okay, a right-handed outfielder, as an example, a right-handed outfielder in Ramon Laureano probably has a better chance of hitting a left-handed starting pitcher than a Cedric Mullins.
Right.
Because based on their career splits and how they've been doing against lefties recently,
heavy.
The stats do not lie there. But also, I think that's a nice job by Brandon Hyde of just, weighing what the numbers are telling you in terms of how those two guys perform against left-handed pitching, but also going, okay, Cedric Mullins is scorching hot to begin the year. You just leave him in the lineup regardless of who is starting. So I don't know if Cedric Mullins will get the start today against Garrett Crochet. Maybe he does, because Cedric Mullins has just been playing really, really good baseball so far. So I think that's a nice balance there and a good thing to see from Brandon Hyde of, yes, this is what the numbers tell you, but also if a guy's hot, he's hot. We're going to keep him in the lineup.
And the same goes for Tyler O'Neill in the last series with the Blue Jays, where it was all for right-handed starting pitchers. Obviously, Tyler O'Neill doesn't have the most prolific stats for right-on-right in 2024 and further on to his previous seasons, but he started off the season really, really well. So to your point, it's going to be the same thing of who's providing the most value at that point in time and who's hot and who needs to stay into the lineup regardless of platoon situations, which we've known, like you said, has been put a lot of stock into it in the past for lineup decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned O'Neill because I think that's a weird little ripple effect here of this Colton Cowser injury. Cowser was an everyday player and was going to get everyday at-bats. Tyler O'Neill is pretty close to an everyday player.
Yeah.
But given his injury history, Brandon Hyde, we have already seen Tyler O'Neill get an off day. Brandon Hyde has said you want to keep O'Neill off of his feet a little bit because you want Tyler O'Neill to play. Yeah, he's probably not going to play 150 games this season.
Him. Yeah.
But if Tyler O'Neill can play 100, 110, 120 games this season, that's a really successful year for him. A guy who has been on the injured list 14 times in his career. So you want to keep him as healthy as possible. O'Neill has talked about the fact that, he doesn't think he is an injury-prone guy, quote unquote, but he's trying to do a better job of maintaining his body better and doing different lifts and making sure that he's
certainly
in baseball
lifting.
shape. He's certainly lifting, but making sure that there's the smaller lifts too, right? Where it's not just, making sure the biceps look good in cutoffs. So I think it's an interesting ripple effect here where you're going to see a lot more Kjerstad and O'Hearn and probably Ramon Laureano as well, because Cowser not getting everyday at-bats in the outfield kind of leaves you without a true everyday outfielder.
Yeah.
Cedric Mullins gets platooned for a good bit. Tyler O'Neill, as I just mentioned, you're trying to keep him off his feet a little bit so that he doesn't run into the same injury issues that he's had in the past. Heston Kjerstad and Ryan O'Hearn are playing in a lot of platoon situations, so it's kind of a mismatched outfield a little bit where you're throwing a bunch of different guys who normally just play specific roles into, okay, how do we arrange this so that every moving piece is doing what every moving piece needs to do? And Cowser being out of that equation makes that formula a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and you just hope that, at least for Heston Kjerstad's sake, that he can take this opportunity and prove that he maybe can be that everyday guy because he hasn't had this opportunity before in the past. And similar to, like you said, Colton Cowser last season with Austin Hayes, just you're hoping for a similar situation. I mean, obviously when Cowser comes back, then it's going to be a different conversation.
Right.
But at least you hope that Kjerstad can take this opportunity and run with it.
Yeah, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he does.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the kind of prospect that Heston Kjerstad is. We have seen flashes of it in the mid leagues. He is a really, really good hitter. It wouldn't shock me at all if by the time Colton Cowser comes back, Cowser is still going to be an everyday player when he returns, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Kjerstad is close to an everyday player, takes advantage of this opportunity, and then once Cowser is back, it's, okay, figure out how to get Kjerstad in the lineup, whether it's in a corner outfield or at DH, wherever it may be. I would not be shocked at all. But we talked about it a little bit, so let's jump to the Gunnar Henderson return, where, again, as we are doing this show live on Wednesday, the hope is that Gunnar Henderson will be back tomorrow, Thursday. That is the earliest that he can come off the injured list. He has been outstanding so far in AAA Norfolk. Yes, there's been, some conversation of watching him in Norfolk and going, man, we could really use that guy at the big league level.
Right.
You were always going to be cautious. It's Gunnar Henderson. You don't need to rush him back before he's ready, aggravate an injury, and all of a sudden you're going, man, why did we need him back for the first games in March when he could have just been healthy in early April? This was the correct move by the Orioles to start him on the injured list. You don't rush Gunnar Henderson. He has looked great in AAA, and this lineup, which has already been really, really good, now gets one of the best players in baseball.
I mean, he's even doing so well in Norfolk already. I mean, a .313 batting average, a 1040 OPS. This guy, you can just tell that he's just big league caliber.
That is one of the funniest parts of baseball. Hat tip to friend of the show, Sam Cohn, for this one, but baseball is the only sport where you just have the best players in the game,
just playing
in the minor leagues.
Yeah,
this is AAA. This is one level away from the majors, but Baseball's just such a weird sport like
It
that.
is so weird.
Where it's everybody else, and then it's Gunnar Henderson.
I know.
Who's a top 5 MVP candidate. It's like, come on.
I know,
You're a
it is
AAA
so
pitcher.
bizarre.
You're trying to get into the rhythm of the season.
And then here comes Gunnar
Yes,
Henderson.
there's rehab assignments all the time. These guys are used to it, but what a funny sport.
I always wonder if there's like guys playing against Gunnar Henderson that are just fangirling over Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah, you
just
have to
playing
be
against
a little
him.
bit. Like if you're a prospect in AAA that's just really trying to make a name for yourself and you want your numbers to look
You're
good,
like,
so
"Oh,
you
man,
get called
here
up,
comes
and
Gunnar
then
Henderson."
you look at the Norfolk Tides lineup, and it's
Right.
like, man, can I just intentionally walk this guy?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening here? So yeah, hilarious. But I think Gunnar, upon return, will probably be back to his leadoff duties.
Yeah.
I could see him batting, third, fourth in the lineup. Jordan Westberg maybe could be your leadoff guy, but Gunnar Henderson has been really good in that role in the past, and so I wouldn't be surprised if the 1, 2, 3 is Gunnar, Adley, Westy. Probably in some order between those three, but I think Gunnar's probably your leadoff guy.
Yeah, and to your point where you mentioned it was a smart call by the club to say, okay, we're not going to put any pressure on him on his injury. We're not going to fast track his recovery just so that he can make opening day. It's very similar to last season with Grayson Rodriguez when he was trying to make it for the playoff push and trying to make it for the postseason, but they were like, hey, this is Grayson Rodriguez. We don't want to make anything worse for him. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the same conversation right now because he is on the injured list. I think that's definitely totally unrelated. But it's the same conversation of this is a guy that we need to preserve for what his worth is, and we're not going to fast track it just so that he can make 1 or 2 games.
Yeah, maybe the Orioles would be 4-1 instead of 3-2 with Gunnar Henderson right now. I don't care. I care about his long-term health, and the Orioles do as well. So just excited to be getting Gunnar Henderson back. He is obviously going to be a huge key piece of this lineup. Unfortunately, we have to talk about more injuries, though.
We're flip-flopping.
I know. I went to the good part because it felt nice, and now we're back down to earth because we have another injury to talk about, and that's Albert Suarez.
Yeah.
On the 15-day injured list with inflammation in his throwing shoulder. This could maybe explain why his first outing of the regular season was not great. He did not end spring training on a high note. He ends up in the bullpen. He was in that competition for the 5th starter spot. It was he and Cade Povich, but it leaves the Orioles in a bit of a weird spot because Brandon Hyde had noted that Suarez was going to be your long man if there was a start that didn't go as planned, like Charlie Morton at the beginning of the season. Albert Suarez was going to be the guy that gave you 3 or 4 innings, and he would have been pretty much ready to go for the entire season. If there was an injury in the starting rotation, really easy transition for Albert Suarez to go from the guy that gave you 3 or 4 innings in the bullpen to hopefully 4 or 5 innings in a starting role. Now you don't really have that.
Yeah.
You called up Matt Bowman. He has looked good so far. I don't think there is a massive drop-off in terms of the talent in the bullpen at this point. Obviously, it hurts to lose Albert Suarez, but Matt Bowman is a more than adequate replacement. He is a good arm, and he has looked good so far. He just plays a very different role than Albert Suarez. And so now you don't really have anybody that can give you 2 or 3 innings at a time out of the bullpen, which is just a hard place to be because you kind of need a cleanup guy. The Orioles have always had one of those, whether it was Cole Irvin last year, a few seasons ago, it was Keegan Aiken, who is still in this bullpen, but has since transitioned into a higher leverage lefty reliever because Keegan Aiken has been outstanding for a season and a half at this point. So you don't really have anybody that can give you that length, and it's going to put Brandon Hyde in a precarious position at some point whenever there is a blow-up start, because there inevitably will be. There always is. And now you don't really have a cleanup man.
Yeah, Suarez definitely brought the value that a lot of the other people in the bullpen did not bring. Like you mentioned, he just had that flexibility coming from being in the starting rotation last year and providing a lot of depth for the starting rotation that had the injury bug all of last season, to also being a reliever that could bring you a lot of depth into the actual game. And what makes it hurt a lot more in the sense is it makes the loss of Andrew Kittredge feel a lot greater as well. Because if you had Andrew Kittredge, you might not even have had the discussion of if Albert Suarez even needs to be in the bullpen. But when Andrew Kittredge goes down, then you have an extra space, and then you have Albert Suarez, who's battling between maybe the fifth rotation spot and then also the bullpen. And it was kind of down to, okay, you have Albert Suarez in there, and now is it between Brian Baker and Matt Bowman? So now there's just a whole kind of trickle-down effect where if you had Andrew Kittredge, then it would have been solved very easily on because you had a guy that maybe wouldn't have brought you that amount of innings that Albert Suarez can, but it just heightened the bullpen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and now you are down two good bullpen arms to start the year in Albert Suarez and Andrew Kittredge. You are still waiting on Felix Bautista to get back to true Felix Bautista. I mean, he has looked fine so far, but there is an expected ramp-up period for Felix where you are trying to give him a little more leeway. Brandon Hyde is finding spots for him where it's not a one-run game that Felix needs to come into. If it's a 4 or 5-run lead like he had against Boston on opening day, that's a nice place for Felix to come in because you want him to get the reps. You want him, you want the arm to continue to progress a little bit. We saw him get up to 98. Hopefully after 5-6 more outings, maybe he gets up to 99. Maybe he gets up to 100 later in the season. So you want to stretch him out, but that's still a bullpen arm that you're being really cautious with. So Brian Baker and Matt Bowman have looked good so far. I mean, the bullpen as a whole has looked really good so far. You've only got 3 guys that have allowed runs with Felix Bautista, Albert Suarez now on the injured list, and Cionel Perez allowing his first home run in, a year and a half or something like that against the Blue Jays. So the bullpen has looked good. Brian Baker and Matt Bowman have been nice arms and unexpectedly giving you, solid performances thus far. I think you knew they would be solid, but, those are good replacements, and it's nice to have that kind of depth. But, it's just tough to lose 2 good arms in Suarez and Kittredge. So hopefully it is just a short injury list stretch here for Albert Suarez. You hear something like shoulder inflammation and your brain goes to bad places because that's one of those vague, we don't really have a specific timeline of things, injuries, but hopefully it's a short stint for Suarez there. Somebody who we are hoping does not miss any time is Tomoyuki Sugano, who was pulled after 4 innings in his first major league start with cramping in his hands. Apparently, Brandon Hyde said it was cramping in both of his hands, but obviously the cramping in the right hand that Sugano throws a baseball with is a little more important than the cramping in the left hand. But he also did say after the game that, got some food, got some water in him, and he was feeling better already. So hopefully it is just a one-time thing. He doesn't miss any time. Not exactly how he wanted his first start to go. I mean, it was only 2 earned runs, but 2 walks, just 1 strikeout. It was a lot of hard contact. There were some times watching that game where you were like, ooh, man, that's hit hard. And it was just hit at a defender, which was good. And sometimes you get lucky like that in baseball. But I chalk it up to a first big league start. It's going to take some time to adjust. It's quite literally a different baseball along with being different baseball here. So, chalk it up to that. And hopefully he'll come out next start and won't have to deal with cramps and we'll be good to go. Yeah,
it definitely wasn't an ideal debut for Sugano and arguably also not an ideal debut for Charlie Morton. But for Sugano, you just really hope that it is going to be that there's still a transition period. Yes, he had spring training, but when you think about the differences from coming over from Japan to America and playing in a totally different league and a totally different culture, that is a lot to adjust to. And I think that it's still only going to come with time for Sugano. I'm not worried at all for him. I think it all comes down to getting used to everything.
Yeah, he's a rookie. There's going to be rookie growing pains. I know he is an older rookie. You don't typically see rookies come into the league at 35 years old, but he's still a rookie.
Right.
And it's going to take some time to adjust. And we saw that in spring training. We are starting to see it now. So hopefully after 1 start in the big leagues, the nerves are out, and he'll be able to come back and bounce back in his second start. As you mentioned, the starting pitching has been to start the season, but the lineup has been really, really good. So we will end with that today because there are actually good things to talk about. And that is that 7 of the 9 primary starters so far have an OPS of 800 or better. I understand that it's through 5 games. I would rather the lineup be really good in a small sample size than really bad in a small sample size. So we're going to run with it. I mean, Adley and Mullins each have 2 home runs. Jordan Westberg had 3 home runs in his first 3 games played. Adley looks like Adley. Yeah. And we talked about it all spring training long, that he looked like a different dude from the second half of last year. Spring training numbers were outstanding, and he's off to a really good start. We talked about Cedric Mullins. He's off to a really good start. Had a great showing against a lefty in Sean Newcomb the other day. So that's a really encouraging sign for Cedric Mullins. He's got 10 runs driven in already.
Yeah, second in MLB.
Yeah, second in baseball. And then Jordan Westberg, he's that dude. I mean, he made an all-star game last year. He could make one again this season. He had, what was, I guess, just a brief little minor injury that kept him out of one game early on. Brandon Hyde said that Westberg was only available in emergency situations, which indicates to us that there was either an injury or an illness. I don't know. Maybe he had a stomach bug. Who knows? Whatever it was,
Hyde just
minor.
mentioned that it was because of turf in Toronto, and then he also didn't play the last few games for spring training just because of getting used to everything. And
whatever it was,
coming back
it
from
seems very minor.
Yeah.
Jordan Westberg is fine. He looks incredibly good. So, yeah, I mean, everything seems to be fine there. Tyler O'Neill hitting .571. Yeah. He also extended the most ridiculous streak in baseball of hitting a home run on his 6th consecutive
I just don't
opening
know how
day.
that's possible.
It doesn't make sense. That's why you don't know how it's possible.
You have to have elite ball player mentality to be able to do that. Wouldn't you get up to the plate on opening day and be like, dang, if I don't make this, then I just ruined my streak.
Yeah, and it's funny.
But then he's like, you know what? I'm just going to do it again.
It's funny to hear from him because I think the typical player answer is like, oh, I'm not thinking about the streak. I'm just going out. I'm trying to play good baseball, trying to help the team win. And they asked Tyler O'Neill about the streak, and he's like, oh, yeah, I was totally thinking about it.
Yeah. He's just the most relaxed, lackadaisical guy in interviews. He's just like...
And then outside of it, intense.
Yeah.
Everything we have heard from, Alex Cora is here at Camden Yards, so we got the chance to talk to him a little bit. Everything that we have heard about Tyler O'Neill from Brandon Hyde as well is just intense competitor.
Yeah. Even looking at him walk in the clubhouse, you're just
he walks with a certain obviously he's huge, so there's a little bit of oh my God, but he walks intense.
He walks with a mission.
Yeah, and he's very nice guy,
right.
Very polite and chill in interviews, as you mentioned, but outside of that, Tyler O'Neill's got a routine before the game. He is an intense guy. He is a competitor. He is a dog. And when he's on the field, I mean, I know so much has been made about the injury concerns for Tyler O'Neill, and those concerns are justified given the amount of games that he has played in his career. But, I mean, we're talking about the last 2 seasons where he was on the field of an 847 OPS in 113 games in Boston last year. In 2021, when he played 138 games, it was a 912 OPS. That's just flat out one of the best hitters in baseball. And so if he can stay healthy, if the Orioles have a good plan for him to keep him off his feet, to keep him on the field, that's just one of the best dudes in baseball right there.
Right.
He is an unbelievable hitter. And we are seeing it so far because we are getting all of the benefits of a healthy Tyler O'Neill. He's a good defender in right field, too. He's got a cannon for an arm. A healthy Tyler O'Neill is an outstanding baseball player.
If he can get 31 home runs last season in only 113 games.
Yeah, he's ridiculously good.
Imagine. I mean, you mentioned the 571 batting average right now. It's also a near 1,500 OPS.
Yeah, he has 1 strikeout. That's always the thing with O'Neill, too, as good of a hitter as he is. The strikeout rate is always going to be in the 30-something% of at-bats. I mean, he had 159 strikeouts in 113 games last year. It's a lot of Ks. He only has 1 strikeout so far this season.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's going to maintain forever, but that's a really good start to the year for him, and he has just been unbelievable. Ryan O'Hearn has been really, really good as well. OPS over 1,000. Jackson Holliday, I know he's got 8 strikeouts, which isn't outstanding. He's hitting .316 to start the year. It's a much better start than he got off to last season.
100%.
So Jackson Holliday looks to be a lot more comfortable at the plate. The exit velocities have been outstanding. His timing seems to be a lot better with the shorter toe tap instead of the big leg kick. So just really good to see Jackson Holliday get off to a hot start. I know this was expected of him, where everybody was saying, yeah, this is year 2, the pressure's off. We saw some good things at the end of last year. It's a full off season, knowing that you are going to make the big league club. It was a good spring training. All of these things were expected. All of these things were trending in the right direction. It's just good to see him put it together, because we hadn't seen him put it all together at the big leagues yet. I know he had stretches last year where, he would put up numbers like this, and I know it's only a 5-game sample size, and I'm not drawing massive conclusions from that, but it's a really good way to kick off the season for Jackson Holliday.
Yeah, and he needs this too. He needs the confidence to start out strong and out on the right foot, but also just team overall. I mean, I know you have the Yankees to compete with in terms of home runs after their unreal showing recently, but I mean, they're 4th in the majors for home runs with 10, leading the majors in batting average with 305. The Padres are right there behind them with 299. So just overall good news on the offensive front, and you hope that it can sustain longer into the season and continue consistently, and just imagine what it'll be when you get Gunnar Henderson back and when you get Cowser back eventually. Yeah,
you're 4th in baseball in OPS right now, 2nd in the American League, and you get a guy who is probably going to finish in the top 5 in MVP voting. Again, top 10. Right. Almost feels like a slam dunk for Gunnar Henderson. So unfortunately, you lose Colton Cowser, who is another really, really good player, but Gunnar Henderson is even better. And to get him back is going to be a massive, massive boost to this team. But a couple of difficult series coming up. You've got the remainder of this series against Boston. You go on the road to Kansas City, which is, of course, a playoff rematch from the end of last year. And then you go on the road to Arizona, where I don't think you're going to see Corbin Burns based on how things
so far,
lined up. But that's still a really good Diamondbacks team with a lot of good starting pitching. So this is a tough start to the season for Baltimore. This is a really tough schedule to start out. Toronto is, of course, going to play you tough. That team's got too much talent to not be a tough out. So the Orioles are getting challenged here early and often, and so we'll see how the starting pitching responds. Zach Eflin on the mound today against Garrett Crochet.
That's
going
to be a pitching matchup.
Whale of a pitching matchup. Yeah. Garrett Crochet just signed a long extension in Boston. He is one of the rising stars in the starting pitcher front. Zach Eflin had a really nice beginning to the season. He looks like the ace that the Orioles will need him to be. Zach Eflin has that kind of upside. I know he is maybe thought to be a higher-end 2 than a true ace type of pitcher, but at least to start the season, that was a really good outing for him with a quality start. So we'll see how the Orioles bounce back and continue to roll here through injuries and amidst challenges, but getting Gunnar Henderson back is going to be a good start. But I think that'll just about do it here for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us live on YouTube and Facebook, as we are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on those 2 platforms. Or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.